I've spent quite a bit of time filling and cutting back all the areas of loss over the vase. I've left this one small area up here, which I'm going to work on now. And I'm going to start just by using a small needle file to take off all the little nibs and excess pieces on the surface. I'm using a flat needle file here on the curved surface, which means that it won't barely come into contact with the actual porcelain itself. And I'm now just going to finish off with this little round file, which will follow the contours of the surface. It's amazing how undulating really the surface of this is. And this needle file just follows that and puts in some of these little bumps and depressions. The next stage is to use a specialist abrasive paper to do a final smooth down of the surface. The grit used to make this paper is hard enough to cut back the filler, but it's not hard enough to actually damage the surface of the glaze, which in this case is very important. I'm going to be using 3 different grades, which will end up with an almost polished surface. I'm now going to burnish the repairs that I've made, and for this I'm going to use a proprietary burnishing compound on a small amount of tissue, and this is just to really polish the surface of the fill and to blend it into the surrounding glaze. Just going to keep rubbing away to try and polish up this area of repair. This was the area of maximum impact. You can just about see the radial lines coming off. They've actually filled in very nicely. The background or the colour matches very well, and really all it's going to need is the few lines and the pattern just touched in, and the whole thing will totally disappear. Now come to the final stage in the process, which is retouching the vase, and it's at this stage that the whole restoration will really pull together by completing the picture. The vase itself was painted by one artist in one go using a single colour, and it's the different intensities of colour that we've got to try and reproduce in the retouching. And that means reproducing colours from these lighter shades where the colour is very thin into the dark intensity colours up here, these inky blue blacks, where several layers were originally applied. Now, in order to do that, I'm going to have to use a variety of colours, from ultramarines, indigos, blacks, and mix all these to try and reproduce these different colour effects. Now, I'm going to be binding these colours into a medium, which is a 2-part catalyst lacquer, which I've mixed here. And this, when it sets, will be very hard and glossy and reproduce the effect of that high-fired glaze. I'm going to first just pencil in a few little lines in this major area of loss, just to fill in the pattern and just to guide my brush when it comes to repainting. I don't want this to be too laboured. It's quite a free design. So I'm just putting in these first few lines here just to give it a bit of structure. And this is a fairly pale line, so it wants to be nice and thin and just flow off the brush. It's not easy to paint in something that was done as a big sweeping wash. You're trying to touch in a tiny little bit of it, but we'll do our best, and it will gradually, building up a layer upon layer, it'll gradually be lost to the eye. It's also quite important to remember that this will be seen from a pace distance, not at the distance really that I'm looking at it now. So one needs to take a step back and really get an overview as to the success of it, rather than the minutiae of the detail. There's still quite a lot of work to do on this vase, and I shall probably be working on it for 2 or 3 days, just building up the background tones, the lines and the patterns, until the whole piece is complete. We'll come back to it after that to have a look at it when it's totally finished. I've spent quite a few hours working on the retouching, and finally the restoration is complete. It's worth reminding ourselves just how much the vase has changed from its previous state. This area here was the most badly damaged and was the likely point of impact when the vase was broken by Anne Barkworth back in 1892. Those radial cracks filled with discoloured old glue have virtually disappeared. To summarise, I have dismantled the vase and removed the glue used by the first restorers. I've carefully pieced the vase back together and glued it with a modern and transparent adhesive. All the cracks and holes have been filled and finally retouched and burnished to match the finish of the glaze. The vase is now ready to go with its companion piece back on display at Windsor Castle.